And now, in studio, bringing his Midwest values from the Show Me State to the land of San Diego. He's a triple threat, licensed as an attorney, mortgage broker, and a top producing realtor who's crushing the competition. Here to deliver you what's happening in the trenches of the market. Your host, Michael Gaddis.
Welcome back to the Michael Gaddis Show on AM 1170 The Answer. I am your host, Michael Gaddis of michaelgaddis.com and frontierloangroup.com. We're continuing our discussion with Chris Cooper, a private fiduciary of chriscooper.com. So Chris, why don't you tell me a little, we've already talked a little bit about why you should have a private fiduciary, or at least the things that a private fiduciary can do for you or your loved ones. Talk a little bit about yourself. Tell me a little bit about your background and what makes you such a good private fiduciary.
Well, I began my career in working in hospitals and nursing homes and went to college in nursing. And so I come into the world of the financial services industry as a nurse when I started in the life insurance industry. So I kind of looked at things as saying, how do we diagnose the situation and prescribe the correct solution for things? And that's what I always approached all the financial services as being able is what are the correct solutions for a given application. And so what I did was I went from the nursing ranks into sales, and sales took me to the insurance industry, which taught me to sell things and taught me a very good career and a very good education as well. But then I also went back to school again a second time in gerontology, because one of the questions that we were talking about in our master's program at the American College in pensions, for example, is why do we have pensions? Where did they come from? And they were originally created to get the old men out of the industry so that the young men could take their place, because otherwise a young man would never take an older man's job in the old days. So they really didn't have anything to do with benevolence. They had something to do with economics. Same thing happened with the creation of group health insurance. During World War I, we couldn't afford to give raises to the people working in the factories, so we gave them health insurance. And at that time, we couldn't pay for much of anything because we didn't have much to offer, so basically people went to hospitals and passed away. That was all that we could do in those days. Now, as we can see, health insurance becomes the biggest conversation starter of it all. So I kind of went over in the insurance industry because I was worried about how do you pay for all this health care? Where did you come through all this? But where I really found the problem was in long-term care, taking care of the person with Alzheimer's disease. Nobody was dealing with that. Nobody was talking about it. And so that's kind of why I started going off in that direction, working with the retired and the people who are already getting ready to retire. And an awful lot of them that were just getting ready to retire were caregiving for their parents. They needed to retire, or they were hoping the company would give them a package, they were getting early out packages and things like that. So the planning was very interesting in that many of these people needed to retire, wanted to retire, and not necessarily were being forced to retire, except their own circumstances were forcing them to retire because they were caregiving. And so I found that the caregiver was the person I primarily focused my attention on and learned what their needs are and how to help them. And that became more the way I geared my training, my education, my licensures. And so when California came along with the licensure for fiduciaries, it was the natural. I was a natural fit. I'd already been doing the job. I'd already been a court-appointed guardian. I'd already been a guardian of children. I'd already done both parts, so I understood both parts. I'd also been a trustee and I'd done estates. I'd also helped people create estate plans by taking people to attorneys, and so I knew the attorneys, I knew all the players. So it's not just important to just having the educational background, Michael, it's also having the network of all the other players that you need, the nurses, the doctors, the lawyers, the accountants, the property managers, the property assessors, the appraisers, all of that, in order to be able to bring all that together. But I can't pull it all under one roof. You can't make it all your own. Otherwise, it doesn't have its own individual independence and objectivity.
Well, as I've told you, I personally have seen the value in private fiduciaries. I think that anyone who's out there listening right now who is thinking, oh, well, that's nice and all, but it's not for me, should really take back and really think about it for a second, because as I mentioned, you never know what's going to happen to you. And when you have somebody who is unemotionally attached, it is so much easier and smoother, whatever it is you plan to happen. And I think that when you have emotions involved, and this goes with anything that you do. Emotions are good. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to seem like I'm a stoic or something like that. I'm not, a Vulcan, but I will tell you that when emotions get involved, they'll skew your reason. You can't rationalize the same way that you can when you're detached from the situation. So having somebody who's detached from the situation carries a lot of value. And I think planning is really, really, really important. You need to plan for the future. You need to have things in place so that when something does go wrong, or if it does, you have a mechanism in place to take over. So Chris, why don't you tell me who your ideal client is. Who are your clients?
My client primarily is that person in their 50s who is either preparing to retire or is just at retirement, and generally has parents living and has children living as well. And so they're caregiving either for both their children at the same time that they're caregiving for their parent, or they may still be looking at neither of those things occurring, but they may occur in the future. And I find that a lot of people have done some of the planning because we've got seminars a lot now. You've got lawyers putting on seminars now for people to do living trusts and things like that, and that's all well and good. But the problem is it breaks down as soon as they finish doing the work. They haven't done the funding correctly. They haven't put the property in trust correctly. They're not reviewing the power of attorney documents to see if they've got all the powers that are needed in them. And again, this comes from experience, and this is the experience I have versus talking to a financial planner versus talking to just an attorney, because the experience I have is I'm the person that's had to work with these documents, had to carry out the wishes that you've written, and a lot of the times, sometimes they don't work, or they don't work well, or didn't work the way you intended them to, and that you can't see until you have somebody who has that experience looking at them with you and helping you with your planning. So it takes all that planning, not just the legal planning, but the financial, the debt, the insurance, all the risk management tools, and pulling it all together in a very comprehensive way, and looking at your own health, the health of your parent, the likelihood of longevity, and the likelihood of potentially a demanding illness.
Well, you bring up an interesting point. In my mortgage business, I help a lot of people get with reverse mortgages.
Yes.
I had a private fiduciary who approached me about 4 months ago. She said that she was looking to get a reverse mortgage for one of the people that she was helping. When I looked at the situation, and the reason she wanted a reverse mortgage is because the person wanted to stay in her house with assisted living, and she had a paid-off house, and so she wanted to use some of the money to draw from the money to help pay for the assisted living, and that way you could accommodate the woman's wishes. The problem is that two problems. One, the house had so much deferred maintenance, and two, the woman had missed a lot of payments on other, credit issues. So because of the new financial assessment and reverse mortgages, it made her a little bit more difficult. So I asked her, the fiduciary, I said, why didn't you just approach me or come to see me 3 or 4 months ago before she started missing all these payments on these other ones? Because now they're going to require what's called a life expectancy set aside, meaning they're going to account for all of her taxes and insurance in here because they're afraid she won't be able to pay them. She's not responsible, and it's eating up a lot of the money that we could have used for your assisted living care. And she says, well, I'm still kind of new to this, so I guess I should have come to you, 3 or 4 months ago. Because if she would have come to me 3 or 4 months ago, I could have got a reverse mortgage. I wouldn't have had to put a LISA on it, a life expectancy set aside. I could have put her into either a line of credit that the fiduciary could have directly paid the assisted living out of, and the line of credit grows. So that would have been the way I recommended it. But it didn't work out that way because the fiduciary was not overly experienced and missed out on that opportunity.
Oh yeah, that situation also draws the same thing too in long-term care insurance, because long-term care insurance changed back in 1997 to a tax-qualified arrangement, and many people didn't take advantage of the previous policies that were there. Now we can't buy those policies today, and I see an awful lot of people on claims on those old policies, which nobody would be getting that kind of money out of a policy they buy now. So they missed an opportunity also because they didn't listen to their insurance agent. They didn't listen to their reverse mortgage broker as well, did they?
No, they didn't. And Chris, we're going to have to wrap up. We're out of time. And I'm telling you, radio time goes super fast. It is much faster than normal time. When you're sitting here in front of the mics, it goes like that. Well, anyway, Chris, thank you for coming in today. This is Chris Cooper from chriscooper.com, a private fiduciary. I want to thank you today for joining us. I want to thank my other guest, Kennedy Maddock from Yorba Linda High School, from coming in as well. And we will be back next Wednesday night at 8 p.m. again discussing anything and everything. And when I say everything, I mean anything tangential to real estate. You're listening to the Michael Gaddis Show on AM 1170, The Answer.